This is the Rio Grande Podcast. Welcome home. Okay, so we're here with Mr. Javier De Leon, Park Superintendent at Estero, Llano Grande State Park in Weslaco. And he's worked with Texas State Parks and Wildlife since 2010, and he's worked with other nature centers within the valley since 2005, so he's got some experience in the backyards of the valley specifically. And today we wanted to talk specifically about birding, to get into a conversation about that, because that's one thing that we have at our disposal. We want to talk about fun things to do, places to go, and that's one of those things that we have here that unfortunately not a lot of us are getting out there and exploring, right? And you taking advantage of the opportunity to try out birding. So we wanted to bring a little bit of attention to that whole field, to that whole hobby. Would it be a hobby?
It depends. It could be a hobby, or it could be a way of life. It just depends on how passionate and how interested and excited you are.
Okay. So there's a spectrum here in the world of birding.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, yes.
Okay, awesome. And like we said, this whole topic of birding was relevant because in the Valley, we have the World Birding Center. And that's only in the Valley, is that correct?
Yeah, so World Birding Center it's a system of 9 sites. The World Birding Centers were established around 2000. Some of the sites already existed, but around the early 2000s, this organization came together with that name. But even though we have those 9 sites, there's more than 20 staffed nature sites. So in the Valley, it's very unique across the country to have, in just 4 counties, over 20 nature centers that have staff there, plus other trails and parks you can visit. So yeah, it's a big, it's pretty unique to have that much of a concentration in a small area.
So we're talking about birding. Well, let's start off. What is it? What is birding?
So birding, a lot of people know it as bird watching, or that's the first word that people use. Bird watching is just an appreciation of birds. A long time ago, in the early 1900s, late 1800s, people would appreciate birds, but if they saw a cool bird, they would shoot it just to look at it up close. In the early 1900s, people started to, I think it was 1909, there was a book that came out, and it was one of the first books to talk about observing birds through binoculars, but it was called Watching Birds Through an Opera Glass, or Birds Through an Opera Glass was the name of the book. That was around 1909, and between that and the first field guides, which is a book dedicated to different species around you and what to look for to differentiate between the birds, that came out in the 30s. So birding is basically observing birds. Since then, birding has gotten pretty complex. But still, if you go outside and you like seeing the little sparrows, that come to whatever feed or seed you put out there, if you really like the colors of a grackle, when you're at HEB, they're not crows, they're grackles. If you go to HEB and you see the purples and the greens of a big male dancing around a female, you're bird watching, you're birding. Birding is a word that I guess it's a little bit more youthful. When people say bird watching, a lot of people think of, like in the Beverly Hillbillies, there's like an old lady that was bird watching, and she had like the safari hat and like the dorky shorts, and people thought of old ladies bird watching. Nothing against old ladies, but that's what people think. You think of old people, but birding is more like, anybody can go birding. A lot of young people that go birding. One of the best birders in the Valley, I think, is like 16. He just got his license to drive, and he could bird me under the table. I don't know if that's a term, but
yeah.
So birding in general is just an appreciation of birds. You don't have to have a lot of equipment, which is really nice. It's good to have a good pair of binoculars. But when I started birding, I wanted some, good binoculars. I started with some Tascos from Walmart for like $15 back in the day. And then I was like, I'm going to upgrade. So I went to the pawn shop and got like $20 binoculars.
Okay.
That I can't even look through right now because they're so horrible. But if you get a nice, decent pair of binoculars, there's a lot of options now that they weren't around before. You can spend, $50, $60, $90 on a nice pair. That'll get you to the point where you're looking at the birds and you can see what you're looking at. You can start there and you can just stay at that level, just seeing the birds around your neighborhood. maybe visit a local park. If you wanted to photograph the birds, you can get into photography and all that equipment. And really, there's no end.
Wow.
Yeah, the binoculars that I really want, I'm not going to mention the brand, but they're $2,300, and I'm probably not going to get them anytime soon. But yeah, then you can get a spotting scope, and a spotting scope is basically a telescope you can use for birds. So yeah, and it's, you can be as stationary as you want. You can just be a feeder watcher. You can just see what birds come to your feeders, or you can go to your local parks and, bird around your town, your county, the valley. Or if you wanted to travel, you can go around Texas. The folks that are very serious, they look for rarities. So there's, I think, over 700 birds that nest in the lower 48 states. So the really serious bird watchers, they've seen all of those. So they've seen every nesting bird in the U.S., including the ones you have to travel, to like Canada or almost to Canada to see. And then on top of that, they find rarities too. So we're very lucky in the valley because sometimes we live so close to Mexico, sometimes birds wander up. So we can chase rarities here in the valley, and you can get to meet people that are visiting from all over the country just to see, for example, the bat falcon at Santa Ana Wildlife Refuge. Sorry, Sam. I know you didn't see that one. I know you chased it, but
We tried.
some people, if they have the funds, if they have the time, if they hear of a rare bird that showed up in, Maine, like a Steller's sea eagle, which is usually an eagle that's in Asia. They had it in Maine for a couple weeks. So if you guys were real serious birders, you had the money and you had the time, you had the airline miles, you cash them in, go to Maine. If you get lucky, you see it the first day, and then you just fly right back, and boom, check. You have another tick on your list. It could be, like I said, it's like we were saying earlier, it's a spectrum. You can be pretty casual about it, or you can be real serious. And then, of course, there's people that travel all over the world. The really neat thing about birding is a lot of it is on the honor system. So if I told you all right now, when I was walking into where we are recording, I heard some green parakeets outside, right? I'm telling the truth because for birders, that's all you have. You have your reputation that you tell the truth. So even, birders that have seen 800 birds, if a particular birder that has seen 800 birds says, hey, you know what? I just went outside and I saw, such and such duck. And if you know anything about birds, that duck shouldn't be here. And it'd be, unless you have a picture of it, you're probably like not telling the truth. And after that, they might say, well, Chuck over there, he said he had a gray lag goose. I don't think no, man. And then your reputation starts going down a little bit. So it's all in the honor system. So it's really unique to have a hobby that's just based on your word. A lot of people want more than that. The birds you've seen in your life is called a life list, right? For us today, if we were to go outside, if we'd seen the grackles outside and maybe a couple of sparrows flying by, if you've never been bird watching, that's your life list is at common grackle, house sparrow. If we were to spend the day at the scenic wetlands here in Edinburgh, the Edinburgh Birding Center, today in the summer, we'd probably get like 25, 30 birds. So now your life list is at 30. Living in Hidalgo County, which is one of the birdiest places in the country, within a month of June, maybe you get to like 70 or 80 species. If it was if it was May during peak migration when the birds are flying through the valley because they're migrating between South America and North America, within a couple weeks, you might get 200 or 300 just in Hidalgo County. So maybe 250, maybe not 300. You have to get to 300. You have to get to the coast. So that's your life list, right? If you like to travel around, your life list just grows. So to have a life list, that's one list that you can keep. If you wanted to have a year list, that's all the birds you've seen in a year. Also, there's county listers, and then you can have a yard list, how many birds you've seen in your yard. And how to keep track of that, before 2006, 2007, people would buy special like software that you can have on a computer. And that's like, getting kind of techie and nerdy. Or you can have just a piece of paper or your bird book. You can just check things off or put a date where you saw the bird and all that stuff. Around 2006, 2007, the Cornell Lab of Ornithology developed a website where people can upload their sightings. It's called eBird, ebird.org, right? You go on eBird, you say, okay, we saw house sparrow, green parakeet, great-tailed grackle outside. You upload that, your life list is online, and it automatically, the website now basically says, okay, you have 3 birds for your county list for Hidalgo County, 3 birds for your Texas list, 3 birds for your lower 48 list. And it keeps track of all that. So what does Cornell do with that information? That information gets used by scientists. So between me and you, if we were birding all year here, and based on where we saw the birds and when, they can use that information for their bird studies. So since 2006, 2007, thousands of people, lots of observations all over the world have been submitted. So now ornithologists are actually, the people that study birds are actually able to make migration maps. So they can see that in the wintertime, scissor-tail flycatcher, right? Look, those birds we see on the wires with the long tails. In December, there's a few down here. Maybe in December you wouldn't see any in the valley, any in the U.S. And then in March and April, boom, you see a whole bunch of them being reported. First in the valley, then around San Antonio, Austin, and then by April, they're in Oklahoma. And they're there all summer. And then once September, October hits, they're done nesting, and you can see all the observations like dwindling from people. And you can see through people's eBird observations, the map, the migration map. And you can see this all online. You can go online, you see the migration animations, and you can see tons of birds. And what scientists kind of would guess what was happening to those birds, like where the birds would go, basically through people's observations, we're able to confirm a lot of that. So it's kind of neat. There are some people that get competitive with bird watching. For Hidalgo County, there's a top 100 list for every county in the U.S., and I think right now I'm number 19, and which is okay out of 100.
There's leaderboards involved.
Yes, there's leaderboards, and some people, the top 5 or the top 10 people, they want to get 300 species in Hidalgo County in 1 year. So I guess I'm not that serious about it. I'm pretty casual. I'm very knowledgeable, but yeah, I just I don't know. Sometimes I like to sleep in instead of going out.
Definitely.
But yeah, it's a big spectrum, and I think I think what makes the valley special, when we're talking about, well, this is one of the reasons that I really liked your podcast, because you focus on the Rio Grande Valley, and one of the reasons why the valley is so special is because not only do we get a lot of birds that migrate through the valley, if we think about where we are, we're, right now we're around Edinburgh, right? So we're about 50 miles from the coast. We're about 60 or 70 miles from, Rio Grande City, where it gets real dry. If you go up north, that's where, if you go up north all the way to Canada, we get a lot of the northern birds migrating south. In the wintertime or in the springtime, we get a lot of birds migrating north. So we get seabirds, desert birds, and then a lot of migratory birds. And on top of that, the valley is the only land connection to basically the tropics, which is Central and South America. There's an area called the tropics between the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer. If you remember what it looked like on the globe. Within that band, that's the center for biodiversity for the whole world. So we're the only land connection to that. So there's a lot of birds in the valley, like, for example, chachalacas. They're the only member of the Guan and Curacao family that you can see in the U.S., and we have them in our backyards, right? Green jays, those, you can see them up to maybe San Antonio, but it's only San Antonio and south down to the valley. Altamira Orioles, everybody knows the Baltimore Orioles because of the baseball team. Well, we have the Altamira Orioles, and the only place you can see that is basically within 20 miles of the Rio Grande River.
Wow. Okay. And that was one of the things I was wondering too. Is like, why in the first place is birding such a big thing in the valley? So that's why it's popular. That's why it's good.
Yeah, several reasons. So let's say we're a birder from Chicago, Illinois, right? So in that part of the country, you get to see a lot of the species of birds that are kind of in the northern climates, like warblers and just whatever birds are up in that area of the country, right? If you're a bird watcher, you have your life list. You've seen a bunch of birds in that part of the country. But if you look at your field guide, for the whole U.S., man, I've seen a bunch of blue jays, but I really want to see a green jay. And you look at the map and you see, you got to go to South Texas. You keep on going through the book, you're in the duck area, and you see, I've seen pied-billed grebe, which is it looks like a baby duck, but it's actually another type of bird. You see pied-billed grebe, you see long-eared grebe. It's like, hey, look, what least grebe? Oh, I got to go to South Texas to see that. And then if you keep on going, you notice that there's maybe 20 or 30 birds that you have to come to South Texas to see. On top of that, the birds you're seeing in your area of the world, outside of the valley, there's actually tall trees, that are like taller than 20 feet, 30 feet. So up there, you might be looking at a warbler, which is smaller than the palm of your hand or just about the size of the palm of your hand. But you have to see that bird 60 feet up. If you come down here during migration, you can see it, 10 feet up in a tree. So it's easier birding, plus the tropical stuff. Plus, while you're down here in the valley, you might hear through the birder network of people, hey, you know what? They just saw this rare bird. It's only been seen twice in the U.S. in the last 100 years, and it's over at the university in Brownsville. So yeah, let's go check it out. Or people might say, well, for my life list, I need this bird, this bird, this bird, plus as a rarity. Let's go. And people make a trip down here.
Wow. So, man, it's such a big world that I guess we just never knew was there. For our listeners that are thinking about getting into birding or looking for something to do on weekends, why should we start birding? Why did you start? What is there to love about birding?
I grew up in the valley. I grew up in Harlingen. For a lot of folks, when you're growing up here, you're like, man, I want to leave. Like, man, the valley, XYZ, right? It's hot. It's a lot cooler in Austin. It's a lot more going on socially, But what a lot of people don't realize is a lot of people travel to the valley to see it, to experience the birds and all that kind of stuff. How I got started, since I was a kid, I always liked being outside. I liked nature. I liked plants and insects and stuff. And I was a skateboarder, so I would skateboard outside all the time. I live near where they have the birding festival in Harlingen. And one time I was outside skateboarding on the street, and these people with safari clothes were walking down the street, and they had these vests, and they had all kinds of pockets and stuff, and they had binoculars. And I had to go up to them, and I said, "Hey, are y'all lost? What's going on? What are y'all doing?" And they said, "Oh, we're looking for parrots. We're looking for red-crowned parrots." I was like, "Parrots here?" And they're like, "Yeah, they're right there." And I looked up, and I'd lived there for 16, 17 years, and I'd never noticed that there was parrots hanging out on the wires above my house. I'd seen birds, but I just thought they're all grackles, So that was kind of one of the things that happened that hey, you know what? There's birds here. But it's kind of, I don't know if it's sad, but it does say something that I had to learn about how special the valley is from people that were just visiting the valley. We that are from down here, I think we should be proud that people spend their vacations down here, looking at this stuff. I don't see myself living anywhere else. The birding is a big thing, because you get to see a lot of really cool stuff. The food is good. We haven't had a bad hurricane in 15 years. We're due, I guess. But even Hurricane Dolly wasn't it was bad, but not too bad. Um, Tornadoes, we don't have a lot. Did I say the food is good?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's a big one.
Yeah, and people are friendly. We can't drive, but it's okay. But yeah, it's a special place, and it's one of the things that I like working at the state park is I get to influence a lot of what we do, how we communicate with the community, and one of the things that we like to promote a lot. We do a lot of outreach to say, hey, the parks are here for you, and we try to show people how special the valley is. And when you see a certain butterfly, we tell people, hey, you know what, that butterfly in the whole U.S., you have to travel to the valley just to see that butterfly. Same thing for birds, same thing for dragonflies, even some of the flies we have around here, they're just here in the valley. So we do a lot of outreach to tell people how special the valley is. I think last year, I think it was 8,500 people that we reached through outreach. So we go out to just a lot of events, just set up a table for the park. I think this summer we're going to go to PokeFest in McAllen because there's a lot of similarities between finding Pokemon in the wild, whether it's through the video game or through Pokemon Go, to birding. Because if you think about Pokemon Go, you have your phone out. I hope people still play Pokemon Go. I know certain people do, but if you remember back in 2016 when everybody was playing it, you have your phone out, you're scanning around, and boom, out pops a rare Pokemon. You get really excited, shiny Charmander, whatever. It's the same thing for birding. You're going down a trail, and you look up, and you're like, oh man, that's a male summer tanager. And, it's April. This is when they're supposed to be here. And you check it off on your list. So it's like you have a Pokédex, you have a bird list. A lot of similarities.
Wow, that's very true.
Yeah, and maybe you're going to have another podcast explaining all that Pokemon stuff. But,
Yeah.
but basically, or a lot of people understand it's like baseball cards. If you collect baseball cards, you're walking down the trail, and all of a sudden you see like a Lou Gehrig just in a tree, or a Babe Ruth card. It's the same thing with birds. You can be walking down the trail, you've seen all the, you have all kinds of hawks on your list, and then all of a sudden you see a swallow-tailed hawk, or a swallow-tailed kite, which is a bird that's in the Gulf Coast. You only see them rarely, but they have like a tail that looks like a flying V guitar. That's pretty exciting. So it's kind of like collecting, but like I said, you don't have to be too serious about it. If you go to a park and you just enjoy being outdoors, that's a whole other aspect of it. I mean, you can just enjoy the bird sounds.
Yeah.
Being from the valley, we never really traveled too much. And when I was growing up, you'd see thousands of grackles at your HEB, and you're like, oh, this is so annoying. All the noise and all the poop on the cars. And I went up to, for work, I went up to, I think it was 100 miles west of Dallas for a training. And I was with a really good birder with our group. We're like, hey, let's go birding. So we got our binoculars, we went out birding, and we saw a cardinal and a goldfinch. And he was like, all right, well, that's pretty much all we expect. And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, dude, we're in North Texas. There's birds, but here, that's all you're going to get. And I was like, what do you mean? Where are the 100,000 grackles? He's like, no, they don't have that here. And it was depressing. And so I come back, grackles, they're numerous. But it is something that I really come to appreciate. And, hopefully if you're listening to this and you don't want to take the dive into bird watching, just take the time, take a couple of seconds to kind of, listen in the mornings to all the bird sounds. Right now, when we're recording this, it's early summer, I guess. And right now is high season for white-winged doves. If you're around trees, you're going to hear white-winged doves. And if we stop and take a minute to listen, you can hear, maybe a couple dozen white-winged doves around you in an older neighborhood. They're just in all the trees, calling, calling, calling. If you go to any of your local HEBs, you get to see the big congregations of birds. One time, the HEB on Trenton and 10th in McAllen, we were in that area around sunset, and I convinced my wife to, like, let's just stop and I got to count these. So just by estimating, between one utility pole and the other on one wire, you can go like 10, 25, 50, 75. You just kind of estimate that. So let's say there's 500 on a wire, multiply that by 4 wires. So you got 2,000 birds between utility poles. And then how many utility poles are there? How many spans? Okay, well, there's 30 spans of utility pole to utility pole. So we got 30,000 birds here. So from that, there is about 25,000 great-tailed grackles, about 4,000 cowbirds, and about 1,000 starlings. So it's 30,000 birds that we can see tonight if we all wanted to go see. Plus the green parakeets, which are a wild parakeet that is considered native to the valley. And on any given night, you can go to North McAllen, see the parakeets, and if you're lucky, you might see some tourists with binoculars looking at the parakeets. And if you approach them in a friendly way and just say, "Hey, what are you looking at?" They'll tell you. And I always ask them where they're from, and they'll be from all over the place. So California, the Midwest, the Northeast. This afternoon, I was talking to a gentleman from, he lives in New York City, and he came down here for the week just to look at the birds. And that's something that happens all year round. And I didn't want to tell him that, this time of year is not great. You're just going to see, this time of year, you're going to see a lot of the nesting birds that are local. But yeah. And you normally, if you wanted to get into this kind of stuff, a good time to do it is you can visit the Rio Grande Valley Birding Festival in November, and that's when, if you wanted to buy a pair of binoculars and you have the cash, check it out, because you can try all the different kinds of birding binoculars there are from all the different companies: Swarovski, Nikon, Leica. If you want to take a tour, you can do that. You can pay, even though today we can go to Estero, Llano Grande, pay the $5 and bird there. If you wanted to take a tour with 40 other people, plus the person guiding the tour is probably the person that wrote one of the field guides you're using, you can do that. From November till about April, May, that's like the peak of the birding season for the valley. And in November there's a birding festival. In December you can join a Christmas bird count, where you can go with a group of people and count birds, and it's part of the longest running scientific study that's sponsored by the Audubon Society. Or January and February, there's so many winter Texans that go birding that you can just go to a park and quickly make friends with somebody, and they can tell you like where all the birds are, basically.
So you mentioned the state park Estero Llano Grande in Weslaco. It's part of the World Birding Center. So what can someone expect to see and find if they want to spend a day at the state park there in Weslaco? So
at Estero Llano Grande State Park, we're known for our wetlands. So we have a system of wetlands during the wintertime that brings in lots of migratory ducks. So you can see several species of ducks there. Next to the wetlands, we have an area that used to be a mobile home park for over 50 years. And at the mobile home park, people were able to plant whatever trees they wanted. So aside from the ebony trees and, oak trees that people like a lot, there's also fruit trees like avocado and mango and loquat trees and things like that. It's just a very green area, and that attracts lots of songbirds. There's 5 miles of trails. We also have one pond. Most of the ponds are about a foot deep, maybe 2 feet. One pond is 10 to 12 feet deep. And since the 70s, it's known to have a couple alligators living there. So if you go out anytime during the year, if it's not too hot, the alligators might be out. And it's maybe about a 20-minute walk from the headquarters. So a lot of folks, a lot of local folks, they go out there. We charge $5 per person. Kids 12 and under are always free, and pay the admission fee, maybe grab a water from the store, and they'd see if the alligators are out. Certain times of the year, I think it's late summer, you might see some baby alligators out there. I can't say that I've been at the park for almost 9 years, and I've only seen the alligators out of the water once in 9 years. So it's pretty safe. We don't allow any swimming or fishing or anything in the park, but it is pretty neat to see a gator kind of swimming by where you're at. There's also other stuff, of course, lots of birds. So that's Estero, Llano Grande in Weslaco. Weslaco is very lucky to have 3 nature centers. So there's Estero, Llano Grande. You can head over to Frontera Audubon, which is an old. There's a historic house with a couple of acres of dense like woodlands around it. That's really nice. And if you wanted to pop over within the same couple of hours to the Valley Nature Center, you can walk their trails and see some more birds. And that's just in Weslaco. Something I'm working on right now is a map of, if you wanted to drive for 15 minutes, like what nature centers could you go see? So if you live in Harlingen, you can go to Ramsey Park. There in Harlingen, which doesn't have a staff. There's restrooms there. If you have another 20 minutes, you can go to Palo Alto Battlefield over near Brownsville, or if you wanted to drive to Laguna, Atascosa, which is, I think, at Laguna, they've seen almost 400 species of birds ever recorded there. You can do that. So there's just lots of options, lots of places to go.
So it sounds like birding is a big part of the valley's identity. Is there anything that we should be doing to help support that resource, or anything we shouldn't be doing that maybe unknowingly we're hurting the birds or affecting their ability to thrive here in the area?
That's a really good question, Sam. So I think there's a lot of stuff that we can do, definitely. One of the things that Quinta Mazatlan and John Brush over in McAllen is working on is there's a whole movement to continue or to encourage urban forests. So if you think of a neighborhood, just a typical neighborhood in the valley, an older neighborhood, depends on the neighborhood, but you might have like large mesquite trees, large hackberry trees, large oak trees. So those provide habitat, right, for the birds. Ebony trees are a little bit better because they're native to this area. Oak trees, they're native to maybe northern Hidalgo County, but they don't provide as much food for the birds. So if you're thinking of an urban forest that would support birds, you have to have plants that support insects because that's what birds eat, right? And a lot of other animals. Planting plants that support insects goes a long way. So native plants are a lot better than non-native plants. So if you're planting a tree, if you have a house, like, we just got a house a couple of years ago. We had an area that needed a tree. Instead of putting a crepe myrtle, which is non-native and doesn't have a lot of insects, we put in yellow sephora. That one's native. The flowers provide more nectar for hummingbirds.
Wow. Okay.
And they kind of seed themselves, and we can have a couple trees.
So what we plant can definitely help support the populations that we have in our area, in our backyards.
Yes. And that's another thing too. If you think about, if you're a butterfly, right? And you're flying through a neighborhood, you're in search of nectar, right? Or you're in search of a plant to lay your egg on, because butterflies each have a certain host plant or a group of plants that they have to lay their eggs on. So if you are a butterfly flying through a neighborhood and all you see is oak trees and grass, and you need to have a pipe vine plant or a passion vine plant where you lay your eggs on, you're just going to keep on flying until you find a house that actually has a passion vine. So the diversity of plants is very important. And I hate to say it, but a monoculture of just grass and trees is not going to do it. So just encouraging folks. I don't want to sound like I'm, bad-mouthing anybody. Yards are nice. I have a yard. But putting in there some native plants that'll provide nectar or that'll provide food for the larvae of the butterflies or caterpillar or moths or any kinds of bugs is also very important. So There's a lot of really good work being done in the valley. Like I was saying, John Brush over at Quinta Mazatlan, they've been starting mini forests. So he's got a whole nursery through the Center for Urban Ecology. And they're doing a lot of work to kind of promote that. Having these green spaces, whether it's a state park like Estero or whether it's a city park or even an empty woodlot, having those green spaces, when you go outside, it does affect your mental health. Being around an urban area for too long, you want to go outside and enjoy some green space time. And that's something we're really lucky to have. If anybody's been to Santa Ana Wildlife Refuge, you're in a forest that you don't think would be in the valley, but you're in a riparian forest. It's a tall forest. Unfortunately, if you look at a map, you see the 1,000 acres that is Santa Ana, and it's surrounded by crop fields, right? So, how could that be changed? Luckily, U.S. Fish and Wildlife back in the 90s bought a lot of property along the river, and they've replanted a lot. But, in the future, as our cities grow, that has to be a big part of that development, just making sure there's enough green space. And then people, going out to parks and seeing what's possible, like how their neighborhoods can look. It doesn't have to look overgrown. It just has to have a good diversity of plants to help support our green jays and chachalacas. If I had my say, or if I could wave a magic wand, I'd want every person in the valley to have a green jay and chachalaca in their backyard, because it's just really special. Especially if you've never seen a green jay, just seeing one fly by. It's a green bird with a blue head and a yellow belly. I mean, that's how cool is that? And, if you, with the right amount of plants, with the right trees, you can just have one, you can see one outside of your tree drinking coffee in the morning. So why don't we all see that right now? And what can we do to change that? So,
well, awesome. I think you just motivated a lot of us to go outside and plant some native plants and trees in our yards, right? And it's something easy that we can do. It's very, it's a tangible way to get involved, right? To support the wildlife out there. And with that in mind, I mean, so you've spent a long time now working on supporting the preservation of wildlife here in the valley specifically. Let me ask you, what's one thing you love about the valley? Let's talk about that a little bit. Tell me one thing that has kept you here.
I think my first nature job, or the first job at a park, when I was going to college at UTRGV, I really wanted to become a wildlife biologist. So I wanted to be the guy that, would catch the birds and study them and measure them and, do research, write papers, scientific papers about the birds. But at my first job, one of the things I did was provide tours, right? And I realized that, like we were saying earlier, there's a lot of eco-tourists that they come in here or they travel to the valley and they know a lot. Like, I was really impressed one time when there was a group of, I think, like 8 folks from England, and they not only knew the songs of all our birds, but they knew the chip notes. So basically a bird might say a song like doodle-doodle, whatever, but sometimes they do a little chip, like chip, chip. And each bird has a different little chip note. It's different. And these folks from England knew this stuff. The next hour, I was spending time with a family from Mission, and 1, they had never been there. 2, they'd never seen a green jay. They've lived their whole life here, and they'd never seen this green bird that lives here. And it really struck me, how many other folks in the valley aren't aware of this kind of stuff, and I think, there's a lot of pride with that. Not the bad pride that you hear about, but there's, it's good to be proud of where you live. So I guess my focus changed from studying the birds to telling people about birds and about plants. And then I discovered that you can make a whole career out of that. It's called taking science, scientific facts, like how to identify a bird, and, talking to a family and knowing how to talk about birds and plants and stuff to that group of people. That's called interpretation. And there's a whole career path. if you're talking to kindergartners, you talk differently to kindergartners as opposed to talking to a bunch of ecotourists. So really, if I was to look back, that's basically what I've tried to do for the last almost 20 years is just, talk about the valley and make people try to put the word out, make valley people proud of what we have. What's one of my favorite things? No 2 days are the same when you're out in nature, and you never know what you're going to see. There's a book called Kingbird Highway where a gentleman by the name of Ken Kaufman travels all over the country, doing a big year, which is how many, trying to see as many birds as you can in 1 year all over the United States. And the book ends with, even though you don't feel like going out in nature, you have to go because you just never know what you're going to see. So we see that a lot. Working in a park every day, I could see we saw a baby coyote that we were taking a video of the other day. This morning, I saw a turtle laying eggs in its nest. So, yeah, that's my favorite thing. You just never know what you're going to see, and it's always a cool thing to go out there and, I don't know, just see. Of course, if I didn't work at a park, on my weekends, if you go out, even for a few hours just to take a walk, and nature park, a local park, it's always, if you take the time to just kind of look around some of the trees, see what's up in the trees. One of my favorite places to go walking sometimes when it's not a nature park is Billshoe Park in North McAllen, because they have ground squirrels. They have Mexican ground squirrels. And those are, there aren't Mexican ground squirrels all over the country. And it's cool to watch. And most people just kind of walk by, or they're like, hey, look, it's a weird squirrel on the ground. But it's kind of neat. What's my favorite part of being in the valley? You can go outside and on any given day and see something really cool. So
okay, that's a great answer, man. You've got us we got to open our eyes a little bit more then, huh? Especially like you mentioned earlier about never seeing those parrots as a kid. We just don't notice what's around us, or we don't know to look sometimes. And that's the power of this conversation, right? We helps us to see that there's things to do around here. There's a lot. We don't have to be bored at home, right? We can step outside and check out what birds we have in our yard. The ground squirrels you said there in McAllen. I mean, that's literally in our backyards. And
yep. And this is why one of the reasons why I really liked your podcast, because you never know what you don't know until you know it.
Yeah.
It's good to be aware of everything. You don't have to if you want to try bird watching, don't feel the pressure to know all the birds. It's okay to not know. It took me a long time to learn birds. I brought a checklist with me. It's called The Birds of the South Texas Brushlands. It's available for free online. You can download a PDF. What this checklist is, it has most of the birds seen in South Texas, but it's really neat because it breaks it down by months. So you can see if it's June, you're not going to see most of the warblers because they've already migrated through. So things like this, resources like this kind of help you see what you can expect. But like I said, if you listen to this today and you just don't have the time to go out, a year or two from now, when you have some time, it's a super nice day. One of the really nice days in April or May, or maybe just April. And you want to go out and explore, join a bird walk and see what's out there.
Okay. And you mentioned that bird walk. So if we wanted to visit, for example, your park, Estero, Llano Grande in Weslaco, are we talking 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. or when's a good time to go check out those birds?
Oh, good question, Sam. Okay. So for birds, most birds are out during the day, right? Most birds in the morning, when they wake up, they sing. That's called a morning chorus. So right around maybe, half an hour or 15 minutes after sunrise, maybe half an hour, you start hearing the birds kind of starting to sing. So that's the one thing about birding that, if you want to hit the best time, it's early in the morning. So the park is open 8 to 10. You can get there as early as 7, start walking around. And sometimes, you might have the whole park to yourself because not a lot of people like getting up early. As a bird watcher, sometimes if you're going to go travel, outside of town, if you're going to go to, Starr County to see what birds are over there, you get up before dawn. And, I've seen a lot of really nice sunrises. And sometimes I'm by myself, sometimes I'm with a few people, but that's one of the special things, that not a lot of people are out. You see the sunrise. It's a beautiful day. And you get to see all that. Usually, not just at Estero Llano, but at a lot of our local parks, they do offer programs where you can go with a guide, staff or volunteer from the park, and you go with them and they point out the birds, what's out there. If there's enough people and they're knowledgeable, you might have some of the people like saying, hey, there's a woodpecker over there, and everybody goes and sees it. And usually when you start a bird walk, the person leading the walk, if it's 4 people, if it's 10, if it's 20, they might say, hey, like, where are you all from? And what are you looking for today? And within that, if somebody says, well, I'm a new birder, I've never been birding before, then the guide might take a little bit extra time to say, this is a woodpecker. Look how it sits on a tree. It has its long beak that it pecks into the wood. This is a kingfisher. Look at the long beak that it uses to spear fish. So it really goes on the skill level of the person, and sometimes we can modify that to make sure everybody has a good time. What I'd like to tell people, if you've never been bird watching before, go on a bird walk, see how you like that, and then a week or two later, go on another one. And you're going to see that you're going to remember some of the birds from last time. And if you go on a third one, you'll probably know half of the birds because you remember, oh, golden-fronted woodpecker, we saw that last week. Green jays, I know what they sound like now. And not only do I know what they look like, but I know their sounds too. So you kind of keep on learning more and more and more. Now, before we used to use field guides, and we would just kind of thumb through the field guide. Now there's apps. Now there's an app called Merlin, you can enter what the bird looks like. It was a red bird with a black stripe through its eye, and it had black wings. It's like, okay, and Merlin will identify it for you. It's like, well, these are the 3 birds that it could have been. There's also another feature in Merlin, which I haven't used too much, but you can record the sounds around you, and it'll identify what you're hearing. There's a lot of resources. There's an app called iNaturalist. So if you take a picture of a bird, an insect, a plant, fungus, whatever, you put it on iNaturalist, and there's people out there that their hobby is just to identify things for people. So there's a lot of resources out there to enjoy.
Wow, that's awesome. So what is there to do in the valley? Well, one great option is bird watching, right? So we appreciate that conversation. We got some homework to do. I know a lot of us were guilty on those crepe myrtles, right? Everyone
they're
has
pretty. They're pretty, but yeah.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining and taking time. I know you got a busy schedule going on at the park. I actually got to check out the events calendar, and there's a lot going on, right, there at the state parks around the valley.
Yes.
So thank you so much for coming. You taught us a lot. I'm going to go, when I get home, I'm going to see how many birds I can count, right? I'm going to see the 10,000 grackles because I'm going to have to pass one of those HEVs. But thank you so much again, Mr. Javier De Leon, Park Superintendent here at Estero and Llano Grande State Park in Weslaco. We appreciate you coming on, and we'll have to talk again soon. Maybe there's a million things I'm sure that we can talk about when we're just looking at the state park specifically, right? There's so much to see there and so much to do.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much, Sam.
Appreciate that. Thanks for spending some time with us today. Don't forget to follow the show on social media for updates on episodes, interactive content, and more opportunities to grow together. We'll see you again next week on your podcast, the Rio Grande Podcast. Stay safe. Take care.